He does. He does drive. He drives. He does not. He doesn't. He does not drive. He doesn't drive. He did. He did drive. He drove. He did not. He didn't. He did not drive. He didn't drive. He will. He would. He will drive. He would drive. He will not. He won't. He would not. He wouldn't. He will not drive. He won't drive. He would not drive. He wouldn't drive. He would. He would drive. He'd drive. He would not. He wouldn't. He would not drive. He wouldn't drive. He can. He could. He can drive. He could drive.
He cannot. He can't. He could not. He couldn't. He cannot drive. He can't drive. He could not drive. He couldn't drive. He could. He could drive. He could not. He couldn't. He could not drive. He couldn't drive.
He was able to. He has been able to. He had been able to. He was able to drive. He has been able to drive. He had been able to drive. He was not able to. He wasn't able to. He has been able to. He hasn't been able to. He had been able to. He hadn't been able to. He was not able to drive. He wasn't able to drive. He has been able to drive. He hasn't been able to drive. He had been able to drive. He hadn't been able to drive.
He may. He might. He is likely to. He may drive. He might drive. He is likely to drive. He may not. He might not. He is not likely to. He isn't likely to.
He may not drive. He might not drive. He is not likely to drive. He isn't likely to drive. He must. He should. He ought to. He has to. He has got to. He is supposed to. He needs to. He must drive. He should drive. He ought to drive. He has to drive. He has got to drive. He is supposed to drive. He needs to drive. He must not. He should not. He shouldn't. He ought not to. He does not have to. He doesn't have to. He has not got to. He hasn't got to. He is not supposed to. He isn't supposed to. He does not need to. He doesn't need to. He must not drive. He should not drive. He shouldn't drive. He ought not to drive. He does not have to drive. He doesn't have to drive. He has not got to drive. He hasn't got to drive. He is not supposed to drive. He isn't supposed to drive. He does not need to drive. He doesn't need to drive. He had to. He did have to. He had to drive. He did have to drive. He did not have to. He didn't have to. He did not have to drive. He didn't have to drive. He had better. He had better drive. He had better not. He had better not drive. He would rather. He'd rather. He would rather drive than walk. He'd rather drive than walk. He is going to. He is gonna. He is about to. He is going to drive. He is gonna drive. He is about to drive. He is not going to. He isn't going to. He isn't gonna. He is not about to. He isn't about to. He is not going to drive. He isn't going to drive. He isn't gonna drive. He is not about to drive. He isn't about to drive. He was going to. He was gonna. He was about to. He was going to drive. He was gonna drive. He was about to drive. He was not going to. He wasn't going to. He wasn't gonna. He was not about to. He wasn't about to. He was not going to drive. He wasn't going to drive. He wasn't gonna drive. He was not about to drive. He wasn't about to drive. He is forced to. He is forced to drive. He is not forced to. He isn't forced to. He is not forced to drive. He isn't forced to drive. He was forced to. He has been forced to. He had been forced to. He was forced to drive. He has been forced to drive. He had been forced to drive. He was not forced to. He wasn't forced to. He has not been forced to. He hasn't been forced to. He had not been forced to. He hadn't been forced to. He was not forced to drive. He wasn't forced to drive. He has not been forced to drive. He hasn't been forced to drive. He had not been forced to drive. He hadn't been forced to drive.